We're finally on to Wednesday. Wednesday is the phase of the sales call when we get to actually pitch our products and services, the features and benefits to our customers. And we're going to talk about the high impact sales pitch and how we can make it as impactful and as professional as we possibly can. However, this is the bit of selling that most people think of as sales. They think of when they say you're going to sell something to somebody, what they actually mean is they think of pitching, they think of telling the customer about your product or service. However, unless you've opened on the Monday phase of the call well, and you've actually developed some rapport, you've made your customer feel significant, and you've got them warmed up to be responsive to you, you'll struggle. And then secondly, if you don't know what they actually want, you don't know what their needs are on Tuesday. So what is it you actually want? What are the things you're trying to achieve? How on earth can you pitch things which are going to resonate and which are going to make the customer decide to buy from you? So we're going to look at a high impact sales pitch, but we're going to relate it specifically back to the two other phases of the sales call. If you don't open and you don't find out what the customer wants, this bit won't go well, mark my words. So how do we structure a high impact sales pitch stroke presentation? If you prefer the word presentation, please use that. I'm using the word pitch because I think it's more universal. It appeals to the American market. I think we all know what a sales pitch is in the American market and the rest of the world. If you prefer presentation or whatever terminology you want to use, please feel free to use that. However, we structure a high impact sales pitch just like we would any other sales copy. So you can actually use this model I'm about to present to you now, not only to structure your sales pitches, but also to structure your sales pitch, your sales copy, sorry. So your emails you send to your customers, how can you make them more impactful? Because essentially an email or something like this is a form of pitch because it's kind of more of a one-way process. And this is the phase where you will do the majority of the talking. And like in an email, the customer's not going to have a huge amount of opportunity to reply to as it's being written. So we can structure it. We can use that to our advantage. We will structure it just like any other sales copy. So let's look at the high impact sales copy roller coaster. And you can use this to make any sales copy. If you want to make your presentations impactful, use this process. So I'm going to use the highlighter to explain this to you. So the beginning of the sales pitch. What are we going to say to start off with? We're going to say, there we go, emotion, you're significant. So at the start of our presentation, the first element that we need to include here is you are important. I've just heard what you've said. So on Tuesday, you've told me what your needs are. And now I'm acknowledging that. And I acknowledge that you are significant. You are significant. I understand why your needs that you've just described to me are important to you because, you're a discerning customer that understands the importance of these things. But before we come on to the next bit, we need to build the problem a little bit. We have the opportunity here on this roller coaster. See, we want to take the emotion. If we imagine this is emotion here, we want to take this customer on a bit of a journey. We want to pique their interest because also, one of the things you have to say, when you're doing any form of presentation, the person listening to you will be in different modes of listening. Sometimes they'll be listening completely to you, every single word you're saying. Other times, they'll only be partially listening. They'll be thinking about other things. Their attention won't be quite on you completely. And then there's other times when you're pitching when they won't be listening to you at all. They'll be daydreaming, drifting off. So what we need to do is we need to create a little bit of drama here. So we're going to build this problem. We're going to define the problem again. Before we actually pitch the solution and pitch the product, we're going to recap. We're going to have another opportunity to recap and bearing in mind all the things we've heard and understood about their situation, the problems that they might have. We're going to tell a story here. So this is the story point. Can I write this on here? This is the story. So we're going to tell a story which is going to highlight the problem yet further. It may be a story about another customer that was having a similar problem. But whatever it is, it needs to build the problem. This is where we're going to build the drama in this phase of the presentation. So this is phase one here of the presentation. I'd say this is phase 2 of the presentation. Then we need a point of drama. This is where, as we know from earlier, when it comes to how do we use the levers to make people need to do things, we need to make this problem urgent and scarce. We need to say basically that what we're about to give them, the solution that we're about to provide them with, is not going to be around forever. It's going to be scarce. And the problem you have is urgent drama. There needs to be some drama at this point here. This problem, this story needs to build drama. Now, once we're at this point, we've whipped our customer up into a bit of a frenzy. We're engaging their emotions at this point. We then give them the relief. We then move into the phase where, I don't know if any of you are a music student, play music. And I don't know if you know of a thing called Cadence, which is essentially where a musician will use different types of chord, and usually like a 7th chord, to build drama within a piece of music. And they build the drama because it's a chord that sounds on edge. It sounds a little bit on edge, a little bit urgent, kind of, please finish me. And then we provide the solution, and this is what's known as, in music, would be cadence. We have built this urgency, we've built this scarcity, we've created some drama, and now we're going to provide the solution. So in the musical term, this is when we provide the nice chord again, the nice major chord or whatever chord it is that what's known in music as resolves the situation, sorts the problem out. There's a story that Beethoven, apparently, I thought, was it Beethoven or Mozart? Might have been Mozart, where if someone played a 7th note on the keyboard of his piano and left it hanging in the air, he had to run across the house and resolve that chord with the major chord, because he couldn't handle this chord, this kind of dissonant chord that was hanging there in the air. He had to resolve it, and that's what we're doing. We are providing a solution. So we've pandered to their emotion. We've made them feel significant again. We've built the problem using our story, whether it's from another customer or other situations. We've really hammed it up, and we've created some urgency and scarcity in this presentation. And now we're telling them, but we are here. We are here to provide you with a solution. And this is the phase of the call where you actually provide the details, where you actually provide the features and benefits. We're going to come on to features and benefits in a moment, which help you differentiate your products and service from your competition. So that if you're in professional selling, more than likely you're going to be in a competitive scenario. You're going to have competitors. This is the moment you get to actually tell your customer why you're different and why you can solve their problem better than anybody else. So this is this. And at this point, your customer is hopefully feeling pretty happy. They're fairly happy. They're thinking to themselves, okay, this is great. This is I like this. However, if you were to leave it at this stage, you would miss out on one of the vital elements of a sales pitch. Because if you leave it at this bit here where the person is feeling relieved, you will emotionally make them not need to do anything anymore. You need to create some tension again. We need to create some drama again in this emotional roller coaster. And the best way we can do this is, again, on a similar vein to our scarcity and urgency, we are going to create a fear of missing out. So if you don't implement what I've just told you and order what I've just told you and why it's better than everybody else, you are going to end up back at this situation here. And if you end up back at this situation here, it's going to be really bad again, really, really bad. Increase the drama once more and close your presentation. This is the moment where you're going to do your first close. We're going to go into closing in more detail, but we are going to use the different closes that, again, are going to make that person feel significant again. So the reason I don't want you to miss out on this fantastic opportunity to solve this horrible problem that you've got is because you're significant, because you're important. You are important. You're the most important person in your life, and therefore you deserve not to miss out. Therefore, this is the moment you need to buy. You need to make a decision at this point. Buy. So this You can use this high impact sales copy roller coaster, to write any copy in actual fact, but this is how I would strongly suggest you structure your presentations. Okay, now we're going to go on to some practical tips. So let's look at this once more. You need to pitch relevant features and benefits directly linked to the explicit needs. So we've gone through all this trouble of finding out exactly what our customer wants. Now we need to make sure we're actually selling to those things they wanted, not talking to them about things that are irrelevant. Okay, so how do we do this? Oh, we're still on my pen. Let's get rid of the pen. Yep, okay. So what is a feature? A feature is what it is. So a feature is, it is red. That is not a benefit. So we need to understand the difference between a feature and a benefit. Feature is what it is. A benefit is what it solves. So hopefully you can see now that if we've built some explicit needs, then we need to be talking in terms of what the benefit of our product is, what it solves, why that benefit is going to satisfy that explicit need. What's very common in sales is when you understand your own product really, really well, you sometimes forget to make it obvious to your customer. What you have to remember, especially with complicated products, is often your customer doesn't know what you're talking about, and you have to make it absolutely as plain and obvious as you possibly can. Every single time you make a product feature statement, so this car has 5 seats. You need to turn that into a benefit. That customer may help you and may make the link, but you really do need to be thinking in terms of what does your product or service solve? Why is it important to that person? So say to yourself in your head, so what? For every single feature of your product, say, so what? So let's have an exercise now. So think of a product you sell or want to sell, or that you know well. So you may not be in selling right now. You may be still at uni, or you may be still in a technical job. I want you to think of a product you know, either you want to sell, you know well, and I want you to list all the features of that product. Okay, so features, so if we're talking IT systems, we can probably all think of loads of features of a computer, like how much memory it has, the screen resolution, the size, etc. But then I want you to put the benefits associated. So what does more memory mean in terms of computing? I think most of us know this, but more memory means you can do more tasks slightly quicker because your computer can hold more things in that memory at one time. Therefore, it's going to be a more better experience. So you need to think in the same way for all of the features of your product. How can you turn those into a benefit? Let's talk about some more practical tips of a high impact sales pitch. So we've looked at the sales copy, so we know how to structure our presentation. We know how to push the emotional triggers that are going to cause our customer to listen to us and going to make them act at the end of it. We need to think of a way also to structure it in terms of presentation. So you may have heard of the 3 T's. I'll flick through. 3 T's, really good one for you. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you've told them. Remember what I was saying about the attention of a customer. Sometimes they're listening fully to you. Sometimes they're daydreaming about something else. Other times they're not listening to you at all. Therefore, you need to repeat what you're saying regularly so they remember it, because we know repetition is the most important factor in getting your customers to remember things. So think of it in terms of when we see a news bulletin on the TV. What do they do in the news bulletin? They tell you what they're going to tell you. They tell you what they're going to tell them. Okay, They're going to, by giving you the headlines. So you give you the headlines to begin with. Then you have the bulk of the presentation where they go into more detail on all the headlines they've just told you about. And at the end, they summarize. So it's a formula that works. We know it works because it's repetition. And also, just to say, we know that repetition works, but if we did just repeat product features and benefits over and over again, it would be a fairly strange way of communicating. So we can use this as an aid to our communication without looking robotic, without looking weird, because we're used to it because we all watch the news and other things. So some more tips. Present in 3s. Okay, so I may have strayed away from this slightly in this training, but generally, Try not to present more than 3 concepts at one time. Now, I'm not saying items because, sometimes you have to present detailed, complex information, and there's no other way than, sometimes having busy slides, slightly complex things you have to present. However, try and think in terms of concepts. So use stories to illustrate these concepts as well. Because when we use a story, if you think about memory again, if you think about the guys that can memorize a whole deck of cards, often what they do to memorize that whole deck of cards is they think of a story. They think of them walking down their street or to the shops or something, and they illustrate it, and they place the cards along their journey, and it helps them memorize it. We can do a similar thing. If we use stories, like I was just saying in the high impact sales pitch, when we're building the pain, we're building everything, if we can illustrate that with a story, it will be far more memorable. But never more than 3 concepts. Remember that. Supporting evidence. When to use. So often when we're presenting detailed information, we need to use evidence to support and back up our claims. Remember old Socrates and his basic argument brief, which was: we make a claim, we provide proof, and then we ask for agreement. Supporting evidence is our proof. So often people aren't going to take what we say on face value. They will want to have some form of evidence to back it up. So if you are presenting a product that's really tangible, so I was selling hips and knees previously, replacement hips and knees, that is, for a large orthopedic firm, and a really good way to get a orthopedic surgeon engaged in what you were telling them was to actually physically give them the implant, to give them the piece of metal for them to handle and for them to actually get their hands on, or instruments, if you had new instruments to show them. Actually getting the instruments in their hand is a really good way to make it real. Now, you might be in a sectoral market where you don't have a tangible product which you can physically get in your customer's hand. It might be a financial product, for example, like life insurance or other forms of insurance. I guarantee you, though, you'll have other forms of demonstration that you can do to make it real. So you will have in your portfolio, I'm sure, some sort of like cost-saving model or some computer-based model, and I would strongly recommend you fill this out with your customer. Gain their engagement in the sales pitch. Get them to engage with you and actually make it as real as you possibly can. And also, credible third-party endorsements are so useful as supporting evidence and proof. So I say the word credible because if you choose the wrong person and this person isn't either liked or they're not credible within an industry, it can backfire on you. So a good example would be back in the early 2000s, there was a celebrity who was kind of associated with chav culture in the UK. Chavs was a pejorative term for people of a low kind of social social economic group. And she was seen in one of the magazines wearing the high-class brand Burberry, the classic check, Burberry check. And it did untold damage to Burberry as a brand to have somebody who had the wrong image associate themselves with their brand. It took them a long time to distance themselves again from that image. So think carefully about who you choose as your credible third party. Maybe do some background research and find out who your customers actually respect. It's very, very important that you have somebody that is well respected, because in actual fact, one of the easiest ways to sell something to somebody is if you've got somebody. So if you're selling in medical sales, for example, a surgeon selling to a surgeon is far more credible because they have direct experience, and if they're highly credible, then it makes it much easier. So apparently, the most credible person on planet Earth is Sir David Attenborough, who voiced all of the Blue Planet programs. He's been on BBC TV for a very long time. Apparently, he can pretty much say anything, and the general public will believe it. He's a highly credible third-party person. We can just look at the campaign recently to reduce the use of plastics, and David Attenborough lent his name and his brand to that cause, to getting people to reduce their use of plastics, and just see how massively effective that has been. So think carefully in your area and your market, who are the credible people that can really do the selling for you in the sales pitch part of the sales call. And then finally, an exercise that we're going to do. So if you're American, then you probably understand what the elevator pitch is. If you're not familiar with the elevator pitch, essentially it's quite simple. So you get into an elevator or a lift if you're from the UK, and your customer gets into the lift with you. You both press the same floor, and you've got about 3 minutes of a ride in an elevator together before you both get out and go to your respective rooms. And in that 3 minutes, you have the opportunity to pitch, to present your product. So the customer says to you, turns to you in the lift and says, right, tell me about your product, go. And you have 3 minutes. And it's a one-way conversation, it's a one-way pitch, and you have to remember the three, remember I said about three, the power of three concepts, 3 things that you want them to remember, to take away. What do you tell them? I want you to jot down, thinking again in the course booklet about the product we identified earlier, whether it's one you're already selling, one that you want to sell, or a product you're familiar with. I want you to come away with a 3-minute elevator pitch which you could deliver to somebody, which would convince them to buy your product. Sounds easy. Try it. It's really, really hard. It's really interesting if you do this. When I've done face-to-face training courses and you put a sales team on the spot and you say to them, right, go, pitch, 3 minutes, tell me about your product. You get to about 30 seconds and they're struggling with things to tell you about their product. They're struggling what the take-home messages are. So it's so important on this exercise that you get the words around why somebody would want to buy your product. It's so much more impactful. And you'll find if you do this, you won't get tongue-tied. You'll become much more fluent with your products. And when you get that opportunity, which happens every once in a while, you will be able to do this. And that in itself builds a lot of credibility. So I urge you to do this exercise. Whenever you take on a new product, sell in a different area, go through this exercise. And I assure you it will help you.